disadvantaged young people, it was because I was so acutely aware.
And in those days, I remember there was a great deal of skepticism. And
before one day he was the king's shadow, but then he stopped being overnight. The records were wiped clean and the replacement was carried out in complete silence. However, what Charles did after that has royal watchers in a state of shock. There are rumors going around, and none of them make sense. Don't blink, subscribe right away, because what you are about to hear will leave you unable to find the words to express it. Throughout the reign of King Charles, Daniel Hunt had been a consistent presence side for more than 15 years, a guy who is well known for his quiet concentration and unwavering commitment. Always alert and well prepared, Daniel was always just a few feet behind the king, whether he was attending a public event, a private journey, or a ceremony inside the palace. After that, he vanished without a trace one morning. A brief communication from the palace said that Daniel Hunt would no longer be serving in his position. There was no public speech full of appreciation, nor was there any event to mark the occasion of his departure. Yes, that was it. Nothing to explain and no specifics. Those members of the staff who had seen him the day before said that nothing seemed out of the ordinary. He was unruffled, a professional approach, as always. In spite of this, his items were gone by the time the next morning rolled around, and his name was deleted from the internal schedules. To make matters even worse, there were no photographs of him anywhere in the official archives of the palace. None of the most recent updates mention it. In all likelihood, he had never worked there in the first place. The people who were within the castle started muttering each other. Why would someone who was so trustworthy and loyal be erased so completely? It was not typical at all. This is especially not the case for someone who has spent more than a decade guarding the king. But this was more than just a termination of employment. It had a deliberate and quiet quality, conclusive. The people who were closest to the royal household were unable to stop discussing about his departure, despite the fact that the rest of the world had barely noticed it at first. The one person in whom King Charles had always placed his trust was suddenly and quietly fired. What could possibly have caused this to happen? No matter what it was not merely a routine, rather it was something more profound. Before Daniel became a shadow to the king, he had the reputation of being one of the most skilled security specialists in Britain. This reputation preceded him being a shadow to the king. His arrival was not a result of chance. Through his participation in top training programs, he was able to advance his career by gaining experience in high-pressure circumstances that demanded precision and steel nerves. Not alone did he possess physical abilities. He had an incredible capacity to read a room, recognizing patterns of behavior that were not typical and identifying potential dangers before they even manifested themselves. A significant number of years ago, during a royal event that was extremely crowded, a person in the crowd made a strange movement. Daniel had already begun to move while others were preoccupied with other things. Over the course of a few seconds, he had successfully positioned himself between the threat and King Charles, so diffusing the issue before it even made it into the news. Daniel Hunt was the person in question. He became familiar with the king's routines, schedule, and dispositions. He was aware of when to take a step back and when to take his own. The soothing effect of his unassuming presence was undeniable. Over the course of his career, he evolved into more than just a security guard. He turned into a stoic and steadying force in silence. As a result, the rapid disappearance of that presence was not only peculiar, it was also unsettling. A replacement for him was not going to be an easy task for those individuals who had a deep understanding of the significance of his work. The individuals who were there within the palace began to piece together the events that had transpired before to Daniel's silent leave, as word of his departure began to spread. During the latter weeks of his life, Daniel appeared to be different, as people recounted, not because of the way he worked, but because of how alert he had become. It seemed as though he was extra vigilant, as if he was anticipating things. And then there was that extraordinary encounter with the king, which lasted for a longer period of time than usual. The door was shut, and there was complete silence following. When Daniel left that room, witnesses said he appeared distant. Daniel's departure was recorded, not defeated, but rather transformed. Not much longer after that, his office was cleaned out. Ahead before daylight, he had already left. It wasn't the exit itself that seemed to be the source of the suspicion. It was the manner in which it was dealt with. It was instructed that the staff not to discuss it. A number of individuals asserted that his name was erased from the internal systems within a week. The photographs that were taken at recent events were subtly modified to blur or obliterate his individuality. It was almost as if someone was trying to prevent people from remembering that he had ever been there. Inside the palace, there were rumors going around that Daniel had picked up some new information, something that he ought not to possess, and it's possible that the knowledge was the basis for his discreet dismissal of the position. If, on the other hand, Daniel was that valuable, wouldn't he have been kept close at hand? That is, unless the object that he found rendered that to be impossible. No matter what transpired during that encounter with the king, it left an impression. There had been a decision reached. In addition, it was not simply a matter of replacing a bodyguard. In other words, it was about concealing something. The departure of Daniel did more than only bring about rumors. This resulted in voids, the ones that are immediate. Suddenly, security systems that had been functioning without a hitch for years began to feel unsteady. The event schedules, which had no problems in the past, were suddenly experiencing delays. It appeared as though the guards were uncertain, the briefings were longer, and moves that were formerly fluid now felt awkward. They had no one to lead them or guide them. The operations had always been held together by Daniel, who had always been the quiet glue. Because he was no longer there, the rituals that had grown so ingrained that they were now lacking an essential component. It was even more evident that the transition was occurring at public gatherings. It was impossible for new guards, regardless of how experienced they were, to match Daniel's intuition. The crowds took note, the reporters took notice, even fans of the royal family posted online about how strange everything seemed. There was a growing sense of unease within the palace. Camilla, who is well known for her meticulousness, started asking more questions about the adjustments that were being made to the security system. Those who worked in close proximity to her observed a noticeable shift. As a result, she became more vigilant and cautious. And even though the king himself did not speak, his facial expressions at public events appeared to be different and less relaxed. The number of meetings that took place behind the scenes increased. Each and every process was examined by senior officials. Speculation circulated that even the most minute of particulars were being scrutinized in greater detail. It was obvious, the system was not operating in the same manner as it had in the past. And if the departure of a single individual could cause such a significant upheaval, what does it indicate about the relative importance of Daniel? Eventually, King Charles took action as the amount of pressure increased. Everyone was taken aback as he entered the issue without any prior preparation. In the past, a monarch would not directly be responsible for staffing personnel or conducting security audits. On the other hand, things were different this time. During a secret gathering with his most trusted advisors, Charles entered the room with an expression that was composed yet resolute. It is now crystal clear. As time went on, he stopped merely observing. His announcement was that he would be in charge of personally supervising the hunt for a new head of security. People in the room were completely taken aback. This was not normal procedure. This was a private matter. Not only that, but he continued on. All of Charles's security measures were subjected to a comprehensive examination that he requested. Everything, including every routine, every guard's function, and every emergency response, was going to be checked and rechecked. He desired to see answers. After that, the unexpected turn of events occurred. It was the king who made contact with Daniel Hunt. Exactly what was discussed during the gathering is still a mystery. People who witnessed Daniel leaving the castle on that particular day, however, noticed something peculiar. Not once did he appear to be furious or defeated. Having stated what he needed to say, he appeared composed and determined, as if he had accomplished his goal. After that, Charles underwent considerably more evolution. During this time he became more involved in the day-to-day activities. He made it abundantly apparent that he would only trust those who had demonstrated that they deserved it. Speculation circulated that Charles was even contemplating the possibility of bringing in a person who was not a member of the royal circle. This was a very clear statement. A breach of trust had occurred, and King Charles was resolute in his pursuit to re-establish it according to his own rules. While all of this was going on, Daniel Hunt never made a public statement, not a single time. There was no interview with him, not a single statement was issued by him, not even a single post was shared by him. The man who had had such a prominent presence next to King Charles for a number of years suddenly disappeared into silence. It did not come as a surprise to those who knew him. Daniel maintained a professional demeanor at all times, remained subdued, and maintained control. Witnesses said that while he was being informed that his service had come to an end, he remained silent, listened, nodded, and then walked away. There will be no questions or debates. Over the course of more than a decade, he had spent his time preparing for potential dangers, planning remedies, and prioritizing the safety of others. Nevertheless, after it was over, he did not turn around. Were he in pain? Perhaps. On the other hand, he never demonstrated it. This was a task that he knew would never be over. Nevertheless, he had not anticipated that it would come to an abrupt end. Then why is there such a lack of sound? According to some, it was loyalty. There are many who believe that he was guarding something, another person. On the other hand, there is one thing that is certain. Daniel was more knowledgeable than he let on, and the fact that he did not say anything could have conveyed more information than if he had spoken at all. The absence of Daniel was not overlooked by those who were a part of the royal family. Prince William, who had spent his entire life watching Daniel look over his father, reportedly started taking greater responsibility for his own safety and security responsibilities. This resulted in him becoming more cautious, asking more questions, and holding longer briefings. People reported that Queen Camilla was feeling Those who worked in close proximity to her observed that she paid special attention to newly hired security personnel, being able to observe how they worked and how they moved. There was no terror, rather it was prudence. It seems that other members of the family were okay with the move. Nevertheless, this did not imply that they were not concerned, because on some level, they were all aware of the reality. There is a question that arises when someone as trusted as Daniel gets dismissed from their position without providing an explanation, the kind that is difficult to shake. Although Daniel is no longer with us, his absence is still keenly felt. What he used to do is now occupied by new guards. The new routines are an attempt to equal the precision that he brought. People who remember him, however, are aware that it is not the same, but he was more than simply a bodyguard. He was a member of the palace's building itself. And at this very moment, in the time that has passed between the occurrences, there is a void that no one has ever really filled. In addition, if you are still interested, look at the following video that appears on your screen. Despite the fact that the palace is silent, the clues continue to come in. Remember to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned. This will not be the end of the narrative.